I met Trish O'Kane almost 20 years ago in Fernandina. Her husband, Jim Carrier, was a speaker at the Amelia Island Book Festival, or as we called it then, Amelia Book Island Festival. And he had written a book, The Traveler's Guide to the Civil Rights Trail. And he was there speaking about his book. But the remarkable thing was that this was in October of 2005. And I'm sure Trish will tell you, I know she'll tell you, that in August of 2005, she and her husband, Jim, had moved to New Orleans and lived 3 houses away from Lake Pontchartrain on the 17th Street Canal, the levee, or not the levee, what do you call it? The thing that keeps the water from going from the lake back into the... Anyway, so that's part of the story. I met Trish then. I knew she was a writer. I knew she was an environmentally, she calls herself an environmental citizen, not an activist. And I knew that she really cared a lot about the environment and about social justice and about environmental justice. Well, she went on to get a PhD from the University of Wisconsin, and we all know someone else that went there, of course. And she now teaches environmental justice at the University of Vermont. She's written a fabulous book that you're going to hear about tonight. And I want to say to Mark and Donna Kaufman, who own Story and Song Bookstore, I had really sort of lost touch with Trish. Every once in a while I would correspond with her husband if I saw a magazine article that he had written or something that we both had an interest in. But I lost touch with Trish. And last July, I think it was July, I was in Story and Song, and on the new books display in the middle there of the nonfiction books, I'm like, Trish O'Kane, I know her. Her book is out. And sure enough, I bought it. Mark and Donna, who are selling Trish's books tonight and have agreed graciously to give us 20% of the take. So please buy a lot of books because we get some of it, and you can give them away. They're great gifts. But I wanted to go back to a quote that we heard this morning when Mr. Fish, I believe it is, was speaking and spoke about some of the reviews of Marjorie's work back in the 1930s. And he read a review, or he posted a review from the Los Angeles Times about Marjorie's work, and it said, "Precious to her are those eternal verities that proclaim man's kinship to his earth." And then the Miami Herald also wrote about Marjorie's work. "She has the gift of identifying people with their environment so that they seem to grow together." And once you read Birding to Change the World, you will agree that Trish O'Kane has those exact same skills and verities. So I give you, from Burlington, Vermont, Trish O'Kane.
Thank you, Terry. Hello, can you hear me? Yes. All right. First of all, I'm really grateful to be speaking at a conference honoring a spunky, feisty female writer whose publishing journey I can really relate to, because the path of a writer is not an easy one, as many of you know. I want to give a very special thanks to Terry, who I consider a guardian angel of authors and a warrior of the word. Every book and every writer deserves such a champion, especially in these embattled times. And speaking of embattled times, I'd like to dedicate this talk to the defenders of the printed word, our librarians and archivists. That's for you, Flo. When we enter a public library full of woe or longing or hunger for something we cannot even name, there is a doctor in the house, someone who can sense what kind of printed medicine we need, someone who presses a tome into the hands of a child and says, "Read this." So thank you to every librarian and every teacher in the room. This is my mother. She passed away during the pandemic, Bridget Fleming O'Hara O'Kane, when she was a teenager. When she showed me this photo, she said, "I was a real smasher." I thought that was kind of odd, but she was from Northern Ireland and she had a certain way of speaking. My mother was my personal librarian. She was a maid who came to the United States from Ireland to work on an orange and avocado ranch where I grew up. She cooked and she cleaned in the big house. But her day off was Monday, and Mondays were magic for me. Because every Monday, my mother went to thrift stores and bookshops, searching on the sale racks for suitable books for me, her oldest daughter, the one who was going to break that first generation immigrant barrier and be the first in the entire tribe to go to college. I'd come home from school on every Monday afternoon to find Nancy Drew waiting for me with another adventure. That's the reason I became a journalist. Thank you, Carolyn Keene. And then one day, there was a beautiful old hardcover book with a picture of a boy holding a fawn on the cover. Yes, it was The Yearling. So thank you, Marjorie Canan Rawlings, and thank you, Mom, for that beautiful book, for it has led me, to all of you here in this room. So I'm going to start with the question that everyone always asks. Why did I write this book? The first reason is I had a moral debt to repay. My husband and I, as Terry explained, we went through Hurricane Katrina. You're Floridians, you know what a hurricane is. I don't need to explain it to you. But after that hurricane in New Orleans, I fell into the worst depression of my life. Our house had to be bulldozed, and you know how bad it was. You saw it on CNN. So after Katrina, we moved to Madison, Wisconsin, so I could get an environmental PhD. Because I didn't understand what had happened in New Orleans. Before the hurricane, I was an investigative human rights journalist, 10 years in Central America, 8 years in Montgomery, Alabama. I worked at the Southern Poverty Law Center, so it was a Homo sapiens 24/7. I didn't really care about the environment. I didn't know anything about birds. But that hurricane for me was a life changer, and I wanted to understand what's happening to the planet and how can I change how I live so that there will be a planet for the next generation. So we moved to Madison so I could get this PhD. And it was the birds in an urban wetland park called Warner Park, which was right across the street from our new Madison home, who helped pull me out of my deep hole, one beautiful avian at a time. Then later, when I discovered that the birds of Warner Park were threatened by a city development plan, I decided I had to help them by organizing with my human neighbors to defend the birds' territories. And I vowed to share that organizing story so that anyone, anywhere, could help their feathered neighbors. I literally walked around Warner Park in the morning telling the birds, I will let the world know what you did for me. So first and foremost, this book is the keeping of that promise to the birds. And it is a long love letter and a thank you letter to my feathered friends, especially the birds of Warner Park. I think that many of us, maybe some of you here in this room, you may feel like you're in the same fetal ball that I was curled up in 19 years ago, just after Katrina. Terrified of the future, paralyzed, hopeless. How could we not be? We've all just come out of a 3-year COVID Katrina, and now we're going through a political Katrina. Our country is terribly divided. Our democracy is in terrible peril. Wars still rage in Gaza and Ukraine, and our planet either seems to be drowning or on fire. Look what has just happened in Kentucky and Tennessee. How many mornings do you wake up and say, I can't handle the news today? Well, that's exactly how I felt 19 years ago after Katrina. That's the second reason I wrote this book, to crack our hearts back open again, to help us feel again, because that's what the birds did for me. And I believe that feeling is the first step towards positive action. So, if you want to crawl out of a deep hole and muster a mighty human flock to defend all that you love, this book's for you. It's about activism powered by joy. So we're going to start with the joy part, because that's what birds are all about. So I teach this. This is also the name of my course. I teach this at the University of Vermont. And on the first day of class, I train college students. I teach them about birds and pair them with kids in public schools in Burlington. On the first day of class, I'm going to make you do something that my students do. It's a little annoying, but because my students work with kids, they have to learn to dance and sing like birds. I'm not going to make you sing, but I do want you to stand up, please, just for a second. It's just a minute. Come on, people. You've been sitting all day long. Let's just stand up for a minute, and we're going to do the woodcock booty bob. Come on. Who knows what a woodcock is here? We have the volume. Whoa. Okay, people. This is the woodcock booty bob. Come on. Put one foot in front of the other. Bob back and forth. Do it. Okay. Let's go. Oh, I love it. Come on, everybody. I see some booties bobbing back there. Let's go. Come on, it's just a minute.
Oh my God, that is amazing.
So my students have to learn this on the first day of class. Okay, good job. You can
Yeah, by the way, even you.
So this will just take a second, but this is another one and it's super funny. This is the mama teaching the babies how to do it.
Oh my God.
This can't be. This is hilarious.
Okay, all right. So if you take my class, you have to learn to dance and sing. The midterm is actually a bird dance jam. The students work on it in pairs, and they have to learn a bird dance, study it online, and make a YouTube. And then we perform it in a big circle. So if you're shy, it doesn't matter. You're doing it with your partner, but they have to learn to break the dance down and explain it to the children, right? So we have a lot of fun. All right, so where did all this come from? I'm going to read just 2 short excerpts from the book about how birds and how a wild park that was my Cross Creek saved my soul. So to understand this first short reading, you need to understand who I was before birds and who I became after birds. This is me in our ruined home in New Orleans on Thursday, October 6th, 2005. This is right after I met Terry. That's probably the lowest point in my life, when you have to protect yourself from the poisons in your own home. That's pretty bad. And this is me 2 years later in Madison's Warner Park when I began birding. How many birders are there in the room? People who love birds. Come on. Oh, everybody loves birds. Great. Great. So the birders will understand that there's a concept in birding called your first bird. It's the first time you really see an avian with your whole heart and soul. You're not just trying to identify a species. This is how it happened to me. Chapter 2, C'est la vie. What bird wilt thou employ to bring me word of thee? Henry David Thoreau, May 23rd, 1843. 5 months after Katrina, in January of 2006, Loyola University finally reopened, and I returned there to teach journalism. My husband stayed in Montgomery, Alabama with our dogs because half the housing in New Orleans had been destroyed or badly damaged. Rents had doubled. A friend offered me a cheap room in her house on the island, what New Orleanians now call the areas of highest elevation that did not flood. The island was an oasis of marzipan-filled almond croissants, double-shot cappuccinos, and shiny new laptops in cafes that had reopened. The universities were there. Bars were packed. The flooded part of the city, now called the dead zone, was about 10 minutes east of us. A dark, stinky stain that stretched for miles. It covered block after block of abandoned homes, fronted by huge mounds of debris, rotting furniture, appliances, clothing, toys. Whole neighborhoods had become open caskets. Feral dogs darted between the houses and trash piles, furtive shadows. Every time I drove out to visit our bulldozed home, I half expected mutants to jump out of the ruins. In the new post-Katrina lexicon, the city had been divided into an island and a dead zone, and time had been divided into BK and AK, before Katrina and after Katrina. My first AK morning in New Orleans that January, I woke early to a strange sound in a city: silence. I lay in bed in my friend's house and I listened for several minutes, thinking about what that silence meant. All the people who hadn't returned, who might never return, the over 1,400 people who had drowned, including dozens of my neighbors. Then a cardinal began to click in my friend's yard. That AK morning, I didn't know that they may mate for life, that they can live 14 years, and that they may stay in the same territory, which meant that this yard was the cardinal's yard, not my friend's yard. And I did not know that cardinals mate feed, the male bringing the choicest sunflower seeds from a feeder to the female waiting on a branch where he feeds them to her, beak to beak. But I did know this. The cardinal's metallic clicking meant that there was something beautiful, something wild, something alive in the hurricane trashed yard. And suddenly that bird seemed like the most precious being on earth, like the first animal descending the plank from Noah's Ark. I wanted to run outside and hug him.
Oh, pretty bird.
The red bird, as Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings called it. So this cardinal, this single bird in New Orleans was the beginning of my journey. It led me to Madison, where I took an ornithology class, and I began doing my birding homework in Warner Park, this beautiful park right across the street from our new home. And I want to show you a few slides of this place. This is Warner Park in Madison. You know what that bird is down there?
I can't see it.
A heron, yes,
heron.
that's a great blue heron, right? So it has a wetland, a large wetland. It's about 200 acres with a, 70-acre wetland. Of course, for me, coming from the south, the seasons, that was new, the fall and the winter. 100 inches of snow the first winter I lived in Madison. I thought it was a horror movie. All right. Some of the other residents of Warner Park. These are silk moths that I filmed myself across the street from the house. They mated for 2 nights through thunderstorms. Yes, 48 hours, amazing. What's that? People know? Birders? A hawk? What kind of hawk? Red-tailed hawk, very good. Sandhill cranes, yes. Warner Park has a pair of sandhill cranes. They can live 25 years, and they come back every year to nest on the Marsh Island.
Everything.
I'm sorry?
And they remember everything.
They do remember everything, yeah. They remember if you mess with the foxes of Warner Park. So just a lot of really beautiful animals. I took this photo in the meadow. You just see beauty everywhere. That's a photo of a monarch taken by a neighbor. And that's one of my favorite photos I took of the wetland. I like to sit there and hide kind of behind a tree and watch the geese. So 2 years living next to this beautiful place. I was doing my PhD program, and I was deeply in love by that time with the birds of Warner Park because they'd lifted me out of my Katrina depression. I discovered from a neighbor, quite by chance, that because of a city development plan, Warner Park was going to be beautified. I got a hold of this plan. It was 165 pages. There was a long chapter dedicated to our park. Not everything in the plan was terrible, but the chapter on the park was pretty terrible. This wild park, which also had, it already had a baseball stadium. It had tennis courts. It had a 32,000 square foot community center. It had basketball courts. It had tons of sports facilities. And there was this wild 100 acres, and that was the side that I lived on. That wild side was going to be paved, pruned, mowed over, lit up at night. The birds' trees, bushes, and grassy nesting grounds were going to be destroyed. A field that faced a row of public housing apartments where the children had no yards, hundreds of children living there. That field was going to become another parking lot. And it was a field where the neighbors told me deer came in the morning and they liked to watch the deer in the dawn, in the mist. That beauty gave them something to get through the day. I'm thinking of the yearling now. Anyway, the plan was a nightmare. And this shallow lagoon, or wetland, very shallow, we're talking a foot deep, was going to become a pontoon concession. And the city wanted to build a bridge from this side of the park to that marsh island in the middle, which is where the cranes and the geese and other birds nested. So, I mean, a complete catastrophe. They wanted to rent out the island for weddings. The Parks Department needed money. They wanted to rent it out. So my husband and I were very distraught when we read this plan, and we couldn't sleep night after night, especially because we had just left Louisiana, the land of wetland devastation. We could not believe that Madison, which was supposed to be this green, groovy place, was going to destroy a wetland literally right across the street from our house. So we were furious, we were sick, but we bought the house, we couldn't move, we were stuck. We had to do something. So late one Sunday afternoon in September of 2009, I baked 2 apple pies and I invited the neighbors over. Baking, people, you want to know what to do right now? Start baking. There were just 8 neighbors, 8 of us sitting around our kitchen table. We weren't ecologists. We didn't belong to any environmental groups. We didn't know how to stop a city plan. And that day, if someone had told me it would take us 5 years, over 150 hours of public meetings, and 15,000 words of testimony just between my husband and I to protect this little place, I probably would have said, that's insane, we can't do it, I'm not going to do that. But we did it. We founded a local park defender group called Wild Warner. 15 years later, they're still going strong. And today, instead of mowing and paving and cutting down woods and fireworks shows and parking lots, there is a family of eagles nesting in Warner's wetland in a city park. Yeah. And they had 3 healthy eaglets this year. That's actually the eagle of Warner Park right there. So how did we do this? People ask this question too, especially now. People are trying to figure out, what can I do? How can I help my community? We each picked tasks that we loved. We only did the things we loved, and we got to work. Of course, I just wanted to keep watching birds. That was my goal, right? So my assignment for the group was to find as many species as I could in Warner Park and compile a citizen science avian species list for Wild Warner, which we published. and I found 142 species. This is in an urban park. Over half of them, long-distance migratory birds that left Madison in the fall and went to Latin America for the winter and then came back. And right now, they're coming through here. They're feeding, thank you, Florida, and they are headed to Madison and Vermont to their nesting grounds. Florida is such an important place for migratory birds. You know that. You are feeding our birds too. Thank you. Thank you to everyone in the room who has fought to keep the gas station. This is a major McDonald's for the birds. So that list of birds that I first compiled became a 350-page dissertation and my doctoral work. One of the areas, I just want to do one other short reading because I really think when I reread Cross Creek, it made me think of this part of the park. One of the areas in the park that was in the city development bullseye for years, and we really had to fight hard for it, was a huge thicket. This is the thicket. And it was full of catbirds, gray catbirds. That's my favorite bird. I did a study on catbirds. That's in here. They're migratory birds. They go to Central America. And I love them because they're funny, because they imitate things. And so they can fool you. And I just think that's funny. And also because they make a lot of noise, but they hide. They're not easy to find. And I think that's quite a good tactic if you think about it, right? Make a lot of noise, but kind of stay hidden in the bushes. So you might think like a catbird a little bit if you want to do some political organizing. All right. So the city councilor thought this thicket was dangerous. She wanted to cut it down, and that meant it was going to become another Kentucky bluegrass mode wasteland. I knew it was chock full of birds, and I knew it would be a great place to start building Wild Warner's bird list that we were going to use to educate the public and to change policy. So I decided to base my field work in this thicket. I sat in Warner Park's big thicket for 3 mosquito-y summers in a place the neighborhood children called the Fairy Glen. This is a short reading from that period. On a spring morning that first thicket season, as I perched on a large boulder in Charlie's Fairy Glen, tiny fairy-like blue-gray gnatcatchers mewed softly around me while migrating chestnut-sided warblers, there you go, exuberantly proclaimed, "Please, please, pleased to meet ya." An eye-popping Broadway show of a bird, this avian made you want to shout right back, "Please, please, pleased to meet ya too." With a black whisker or mustachio stripe and black eyebrow stripes on a white face, he looked as if he were wearing a black Mardi Gras mask topped by a bright yellow beret. Warm chestnut swaths running along the sides of his white breast gave him his name. Black and goldish wings carried him and his kin from Wisconsin to Guatemala every winter, maybe even all the way to Panama. The sun filtered through the large new green leaves of the maples. I was inside a chlorophyll cathedral of life surging skyward. It was so green, I could have been in the jungles of Central America, where that chestnut-sided warbler might eventually spend the winter. A red-eyed vireo joined in with his snippy song, and the brown thrasher, a threatened species in Wisconsin which depended on shrub thickets, just like this one, to nest in, shared tunes from his 3,000-song playlist. Blasting from deep inside the bushes, the catbirds turned the shrubs all around me into speakers. I began to love this special place because it was also a geology time machine. If I'd been sitting in this very spot 550 million years earlier, I'd have been lounging at the bottom of a shallow tropical sea with trilobites, foot-long pill-bug-like creatures swimming all around me. The boulder I was sitting on was a relatively recent arrival in Warner geological time, a glacial erratic. It had been pushed down from the north just 25,000 years before by the Green Bay Lobe, a glacier a third of a mile high. But according to geologists, The boulder itself was around 2.8 billion years old, the oldest thing in Warner Park. My gift of the glacier boulder helped me put Wild Warner's political struggles in perspectives. Over hundreds of millions of years, this place had been a tropical sea, glacier, lake, marsh, beach, Ho-Chunk workshop and settlement, and a place of sacred mounds. It had been a city park for just 6 decades. As that first thicket summer began and avian parents hustled to raise their hungry babies, I found a family of yellow warblers, a golden yellow mother hanging out with pale lemony teenagers. In Central and South America, where she spent most of the year, she was called La Reinita Dorada, the little golden queen. Bunnies left off the path when I entered the thicket. Jim and I called it Rabbit Lane. Mallards flew over from a neighbor's yard where they slept at night to the marsh where they spent the day. Hermit thrushes that possibly migrated as far as Mexico in the fall spent several days in this thicket, resting and feeding. The thicket was where the foxes raised their kits, where a doe hid her fawns every spring, and where the woodchuck mother and her bear-like babies trooped down in a line to drink water in the canal. One morning I was sitting on a tiny stool wearing a pink baseball cap when a female hummingbird examined me at eye level, hovering just 2 feet from my nose. She was so close I could hear the loud buzzing of her wings, flapping approximately 4,000 times a minute. Did she think I was a gigantic pink flower on a green stalk because of my pink cap and green jacket? She appeared again later that summer on the anniversary of my father's death. Same routine, hover, buzz, inspect, zoom off. Female hummingbirds defend their nesting territories from other hummers, so I could have been sitting right smack in the middle of her territory. Usually, I was walking through the park actively looking for hummingbirds with binoculars. But my new thicket practice of sitting still and doing nothing meant that she could zip in and check me out on her own terms. This felt very different from how I first learned to bird by walking around listing species. And it wasn't just that hummingbird checking me out. When I settled down on my thicket boulder, I soon heard whispery movements of tiny feet and feathers brushing against twigs and leaves. I thought I was doing ornithological field work, but I realized that it was the animal residents of the thicket who were doing their field work. The watcher had become the watched.
Oh, nice.
So I'm going to finish up so you can ask questions. Here's the third part really of the story, and that's the teaching part that I do today. As I was building this bird list, I thought I was kind of naive, and some of you may understand this or sympathize. I thought, well, I found all these great birds. The city's going to be really excited. They're going to want to preserve their wetland, right? Wrong. Okay, some people did. But some people still did not understand why it was important. Now they do. Now Madison does. Of course, wetlands are life-saving. But at that time, we had to educate people. But I realized that if I just found birds, it wasn't going to help them. I needed to do more for my human community living around the park. And in Madison, when I lived there, and it's still true, there were hundreds of kids living in apartments around the park. Their parents were working 2 jobs. They were latchkey kids. And they had no yards. The park was their yard, but there were no programs for the kids in the park. Nothing. No environmental education. So the city councilor who was pushing the development plan, she challenged me. She said, "You're a graduate student. You're studying ecology. Why don't you stop complaining and get that university to do something in your park?" Okay, all right. Yeah, you're right. Except I don't know anything about kids, and I don't know anything about environmental education, but I guess I'll just wing it. So that's what I literally did. I winged it, and it became this program. This is the Madison flock, some photos of them, and it became a very successful program. That whole story's in here, started with just 5 kids one semester and 13 college students. And the way it works Still works that way today, still going strong 15 years later, and it's spread to several states. I teach the class on Monday morning with my college students, make them dance, make them sing, take them outside to see birds, and we talk about educational issues, we talk about justice issues, and then Wednesday, we go to the elementary school as a group, a big flock all together, and each of my 25 students is paired with a child. And that whole group of 50 goes storming out of the school, running for a mile to the wetland to work and play together and learn for 3 hours from 2 to 5 every Wednesday. That's how the program works in Madison, and that's how it works in Vermont, where I was hired to replicate it. And I want to show you some photos from it. But my thought was, that if you teach kids, if you turn them into the stewards of the land, if we turn the kids into the stewards of Warner Park, that they would protect it, because kids are fierce. They're not afraid to raise their voices if you give them the opportunity. And I started taking some of them with their parents' permission to public meetings, and they started shaming those parks commissioners, and some things started changing. And we're still doing that. They have a lot to say, as you all know, those of you who have children or grandchildren. This is the Burlington flock, the kids hugging one of their favorite trees. We actually entered this tree. Burlington has a most awesome tree contest. It's a city tree contest. And the kids, they had to have an election. There were 4 different trees. They couldn't decide on which one. Finally decided on this huge silver maple. And that tree won 2nd place in Burlington. And the prize was a pizza party. All the kids and their parents got to go to a pizza party. And they got gift certificates. And all the children gave the gift certificates to their college mentors, which I thought was very sweet. Mud Day. We have mud season in Vermont, which is about to begin. It's a thing, and children really love mud season. Their parents, not so much. But this is in the wetland area where we work in Burlington. Binoculars, teaching children about binoculars. There's a whole thing in here. Not easy. They don't want to carry them. They're heavy. They're boring. Until you are walking along the lakeshore path in Vermont in like March, it's freezing, with a bunch of kids. They don't want to carry the binoculars, and all of a sudden they start tearing the binoculars off the college mentor's neck because a naked man is emerging from the lake. That is how you teach binoculars. You need to find a naked man. That's what I've learned in 10 years of doing this. I have unpaid teaching assistants. Barred owl. We have a lot of barred owls in Vermont. And I was walking in Terry's lovely neighborhood 2 mornings ago. What's the name of that cemetery?
Oak Lawn.
Oak Lawn. And I try to talk to the birds. I have never had a conversation with a barred owl. I've tried, their call is hard to replicate.
Oh, yeah.
And I had quite a decent conversation with your barred owl in that cemetery 2 mornings ago. He was not happy with me. I think he's nesting there. But yeah, we talked back and forth, back and forth. This is the kids walking along the lakeshore path, 2 kids with their mentor. And we also have herpetology, snakes, and I bring in experts to work with the kids, and so it's it's like Florida. And those are our resident screech owls. So let's see, I don't remember what the last slide is. Okay, yeah. So just to wrap up, this program that started in Madison, today there's 3 birding programs at 3 universities and elementary schools in 3 states. Wisconsin, Vermont, and Rhode Island. Brown University copied my model, brought me down there to train them, and they're doing it in Providence. Great program. It's about to be replicated in the fall in Gainesville by an English professor. Now, he's going to do it a little differently. I gave him the class. I met with him for an hour on Zoom last week. He's got some fabulous ideas. He's going to take it to a whole nother level. The College of Charleston is also replicating the model. The Iowa State University is also. So everybody's taking it and doing whatever works for their community. There's no set model, but I am helping people, and I'm very, very excited about this because there is tremendous interest in it. Also in Canada, This book has been translated into Mandarin. It's going to be published in China if it can get past the censors. My agent has his doubts, but we'll see. It's been translated into South Korean, and that edition is about to come out. It's on sale in the UK and all over the world. So between all of us in these programs, we've trained over 500 college birding mentors who've worked with over 1,000 children. And my former college mentors, I'm so proud of them. They're scattered all over the country, working for change as teachers, school garden coordinators, energy activists trying to stop pipelines, lawyers defending our lands and waters, gun control advocates in Colorado, environmental educators, wildlife rehabbers, urban planners, scientists, and journalists. A former Madison College mentor became the director of one of the largest wildlife rehab hospitals in the nation. Another former Madison student mentor, Krista Seidel, she was in the very first course I taught in 2010 in UW-Madison. She stars in this book. In the fall of 2023, she became Dr. Krista Seidel. I attended her dissertation defense. She is an avian disease ecologist and an international expert on avian malaria, working to save the endangered birds of Hawaii. I believe in the power of the small. Small creatures, small actions. Because believe it or not, this all started with one lone cardinal clicking in a scraggly bush in the ruins of New Orleans. Thank you. I'll take any questions unless you'd like to learn another dance.
No.
Yes. Could I talk about the book?
The book is whatever you just talked about.
All of that's in the book. But do you have any particular questions about how I put it together or wrote it? Or?
I was just wondering.
That's the story essentially. So the story starts with Katrina in the book, the disaster, how the birds helped me out of it, and then how, because I fell in love with the birds, I wanted to defend them and help them, right? And because of the birds, I found a human community. In Madison, I found a flock. So that's essentially the story. It's really an organizing manual disguised in feathers.
Yeah.
Okay, but with stories, right, of my neighbors. Yes, Flo.
Marjorie lived in a place near Lake Mendota in Madison. Do you know where that is in relation to that? I'm sure she had similar experiences with nature there.
I would love to know where she lived. First of all,
have an address.
Lake Mendota is the largest lake in Madison, so it's a large lake. And the city's built right on it. The university is right on it. It's gorgeous. But Warner Park is the wetland that's just about 200 yards from the lake. So there's Warner Park, there's the wetland, and then there's a road, right, a major artery, and then you have the lake. So Warner, this is something we argued with the city and proved, and this helped change policy significantly. It's a filter for Lake Mendota, for the city's most important lake. And if you destroy the filter, you know this, Floridians know this, you destroy that body of water. So Warner is right next to Lake Mendota. Super important filter. And for flooding and all that. You want to ask?
Follow up, yeah. The name of the professor at UF that you're working with?
Roger Mayoli?
Okay.
Mayoli,
Mayoli,
yeah,
okay.
yeah. He read the book and he contacted me, and I've been talking to him for a couple of months now. Wonderful ideas. I am very excited to see what he does with us. Yes?
Yeah. I'd just like this to be a testimonial more than a question. But it seems to me your book is so exciting.
Thank you.
It's making a really important contribution to environmental literature, and you read some exquisite passages today, in the way that, Thoreau's Walden does, Bartram's Travels, Margaret Kennan Rawlings' The Yearling, and then Cross Creek, of course, and we could go on, Fan County Almanac. It does all that. And it's also a book about social justice in a way that I think you're moving the genre forward in just a really powerful way. And you're very modest because you are one person in Madison, Wisconsin, and you were, your PhD, advisor tried to shut you down. No, I don't think that'd be a good idea for the, your the city folks, or little girl, blah blah blah, and later they become your allies. I can't remember what bird you bonded over with the guy who was
American
like,
bitter.
Okay, and so it's just it's tremendous what you've done. So I just wanted to, if you haven't read it, it is as inspiring as Brian Stevenson's book, Just Mercy.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, one person making that kind of difference as he did in Alabama, it was one lawyer trying to, be a difference in his community. That's what your book does, and thank you.
Way to go, Jerry.
Wow. Thank you so much.
That's your next blurb, I think.
Yes, I just saw, I used to work in Alabama, so of course I know Brian Stevenson, and I've used his book in teaching, and I just was at the Mardi Gras for the Mind, New Orleans Book Festival, and he was one of the lead speakers. I spoke on a couple of panels and got to see him speak, and he's one of the people I admire most in this world, so thank you so much for that. I have to say, I don't want to thank a hurricane, but really it was the shock. And you can relate to this, right? That's just life-changing when something like that happens to you. What do we do with it, right? What do we do with it? I never anticipated writing something like this. I wasn't a bird person before Katrina. I was a human rights journalist. If you had said 25 years ago to me, or 20 years ago, you're going to become an ornithologist, I would have laughed at you. And all my friends who knew me in Central America as a journalist would have laughed too. They would have thought that was crazy. So life throws you some curveballs, right? What do we do with them? But I had so many people who helped me on the way, and I have to give credit. Terry knows my husband, Jim Carrier. He's an incredible human and author. He's published 12, at least a dozen books. I could never have done this by myself, right? Behind every good woman, there's a great man, right? And he is a great man. You told him I said that, Terry. Well, okay, not everyone. Not every good woman. Okay, some, but behind me, he's always there. He edits a lot of my stuff and helps me. And not only that, I didn't really want to organize. I mean, I was in graduate school. I was exhausted after Katrina. I thought, Madison's groovy. Madison doesn't need any social justice stuff. I'm just going to get in my ivory tower bubble and hide for a few years. And I don't want to get involved in anything. But when we read that plan and realized they're going to destroy a wetland right across from us, and we had a big picture window, and we're going to watch it every day.
Yes.
And we can't do that. We cannot physically, emotionally, we can't watch that. We will die after what we saw in New Orleans. So we had no choice but to fight. And I said to him, look, Jim, we got to organize, but I don't have time to organize. I'm teaching, I'm studying, I'm in a grad program. It's hard. My advisor thinks I'm crazy. I mean, and he always said, I'm a journalist. I'm not an activist. I'm not going to protest. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do that. I'm just a journalist. He said, I'll be the first chair of the organization. And he was. And he was. And he set it up so we had revolving leadership, and it's still going. It's still going strong. And another person who's a star in this book, Jack Hurst, an elderly, he's now 93. Fisherman and hunter. Jack Hurst got me my first fishing license. It took me ice fishing in Madison, and he became a big ally. He had been fighting to save that little wetland for 50 years. So we didn't walk into this as the first ones to try to do this, but when Jack we heard each other speak at a public meeting, and he contacted Jim and I after that, and he started showing up on our doorstep with buckets of fish that he just caught, and he had armloads of magazines about wildlife, and we became comrades. And because Jack said, he realized these people are in it for the duration. They're not going to give up because of what they went through. And he was looking for somebody like us. And that was the beginning of our group, and then more and more people joined. So yeah, I'm very proud of Wild Warner and very grateful to them. And they're still basically the same people, and they need more young people to join. But it's a wonderful model, just neighbors getting together and using their skills, different skills, and becoming such close friends. We started celebrating Christmas by going into the park and
Sorry.
am I messing this up?
No, not you.
Okay.
It was buzzing.
Yeah, it's like that thing on the jack.
I'm sorry, I told you the wrong. Pull it
Okay.
up. That's better.
Just to give you an example of something we started doing that just meant so much, and I miss it every Christmas. There's an enormous bur oak in the park, and of course the bur oak is the star of the story too, the mother bur oak of Warner Park. That's 250 years old, bicentennial bur oak. The city was hacking off its limbs. We saved it. We brought in an expert. He measured it. All this is in here. Amazing, amazing tree. And every Christmas, Wild Warner, we'd all get together, and I mean, it's cold at Christmas in Wisconsin, a couple of feet of snow on the ground, and we'd get all bundled up, and we'd go around Christmas Eve, and we'd circle that tree, and we'd sing carols to the tree at night and to all the animals.
Oh.
And we started doing things like that in the park. So we didn't just fight, we celebrated together, we planted trees together, we became friends, and we found ways to help each other. And that place, I rereading Cross Creek, I was thinking about how a place gives you strength. Especially now, right? Just my feet on the ground, no shoes. Just that, I feel the strength coming from the earth, and we need that strength there. But thank you so much for your generous comment.
I just gotta say a funny story.
Okay?
So when Trish and Jim were here right after Katrina, I invited them to stay one more day after the book festival because I thought these people need something really nice. And I got my friends that worked out at White Oak that had a beautiful sailboat. Jim Carrier her husband has sailed across the Atlantic single-handedly on a 37-foot boat, the big sailor. I thought these people could use a beautiful afternoon of sailing. And sure enough, it was a classic, beautiful Fernandina day. We went out all afternoon, wine and cheese and rum, and it was like a healing thing for them. And Trish was in such a state of shock that when I was talking to her about that, she does not remember ever having done it. That's how in a state of fugue she was just those 5.5 short weeks after Katrina. And it was a beautiful, it was like something from a magazine, fog. But she got out of it.
Yes.
Yes, thank you so much. This is so inspiring and really something that I feel like we really need with what we're going through in this country right now. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the political side and maybe some of the roadblocks that you were able to overcome in this whole process, because I imagine it got pretty ugly. And I'm wondering if you have any tips about that.
Sure. And I'm learning all the time. Not an easy time. And I'm in a big fight right now with my brothers and my cousins in California via email. We're going back and forth. We're talking to each other. We love each other. So it's hard. I'm struggling. But yes, so I guess I have to give credit to the city councilor. She's now the mayor of Madison, Satya Rhodes Conley. And we fought for 5 years. She was not happy with me. But she was generous enough that when we started arguing against the plan, we managed to halt the city plan in the first big public meeting. And the city commissioners gave us 1 month to come up with alternatives.
Okay.
But this was a plan they'd been working on for 2 years. They'd spent $100,000 on it, like 20 public meetings. But this was the crazy thing. I went and knocked on doors for months. None of the neighbors knew about it.
Yeah, I know.
All right, so, okay, you may have spent a lot of money, but people don't know about this plan. So something went wrong. Something's wrong in the ecology of our democracy, right? This is what I was arguing. And so the commissioners halted it and said, wait, we need to listen to these other voices. And there was nobody at the meeting to support the plan except the city councilor and the city planners. And about 24 of us showed up to oppose it. So the commissioner said, there's something weird going on here, right? How come these people didn't know about it? So she, I thought she was really mad at the meeting. Oh, she was mad. She was so mad that they were halting it, and she argued against it. And afterwards I thought, you know what? This isn't going to work. I got to go make my peace with her somehow, because I could tell she just thought I was a Patagonia wearing, clueless white birder who didn't care about anything except the birds. Thought that's never going to work. I know that's not going to work. I'm from a social justice background. I don't want to be one of those people, right? And I'm not one of those people, but maybe I was becoming one of those people. So I was really troubled by the whole thing. So I emailed her and I said, I'd like to come have a coffee with you and talk about all this. And she agreed, and we met. That's when she yelled at me. We talked about, it wasn't ugly, but she just said, who are you? You moved here, I've never seen you before, you've never been to a public meeting, and you come and you blow this whole thing up, and we worked for 2 years on it. I said, you're right, I'll be at all the public meetings after this, I'm sorry, but, and she said, well, why don't you do something about it, right? So she challenged me, and then she supported me. Even though she was mad at me, she told people, listen to this woman. I don't really like her that much, but okay, let's just hear her out. At least she was so desperate to have participation that she really did give me a chance. And then when I started to meet a community need, which was working with these kids, which fortunately I loved the kids and it all worked out. It could have been a disaster because I didn't know what I was doing. She was grateful, and the parks commissioners were grateful, and the principal of the school was grateful, and that started to turn things around. So I had to think beyond the birds. I want to help the birds. I can't just talk about birds and study birds. That's not enough.
It's about the community, too.
It's about the community, too, and so that was the main thing. But something that got ugly, there's 2 chapters in here. It's called The Great Geese Wars. Canada geese. Canada geese, yeah. Lots of people have different opinions about Canada geese. I didn't know anything about Canada geese, and I spent like 3 summers studying them and trying to stop the city from killing them all. And some of you may not agree with me, but happily, the eagles have solved the problem because the geese don't like nesting on that marsh island anymore. You get a top predator in, suddenly it's not such an easy place to nest. But the geese fight became very ugly, and not just because of us. I'll just tell you one little thing that happened. I went to a Parks Commission meeting to announce the children's program. And I was all puffed up and so excited, and I'd done this great thing in the university, so I was up there in my little suit to make the announcement. I make the announcement, I sit down, I look at the agenda, I thought, oh gosh, this looks boring, I'm not going to listen to all this meeting. And then at the end of the agenda, there was one thing that said, Canada Geese Roundup. I didn't know anything about geese, but a roundup. What's that, like a rodeo or something? What are they going to do with the geese? And I was starting a children's program, so I thought, gosh, I better stay here and listen to this. And so like an hour later, the city biologist stands up and announces they're going to go in at night, or like commandos or whatever, and gather all the geese and gas them. And kill them, like hundreds of geese. And I just thought, oh my God, I'm about to start a children's program and they're going to kill all the largest birds in the parks? How's that going to go, right? Okay, so I had no intention of trying to save the geese, but 2 years later, we saved the geese. But the thing that happened immediately was, because I was at the meeting, I got asked to speak about it, and I didn't know what to say. The argument of the city was we were too close to the airport and it was dangerous. And I didn't know, maybe it was dangerous. Who was I to say? Right? But there was a reporter there, and the reporter wrote, this person was here from Wild Warner, and blah, blah, blah. So it was like front page news the next day, Warner Park geese are cooked, was the headline. Oh, God. All right, so apparently the Warner Park Geese had a lot of friends, because within about a week, there was a Facebook page somebody started, not us, Friends of the Warner Geese. And there were 1,200 friends of the Warner Geese. And so the city's next meeting was gonna have to be like in a larger venue. And these people crashed the city's like email servers for a day or something. So it got wild with animal rights groups, and that got really, really interesting and wild. We learned a lot. Now, remember, Wild Warner, we got Jack Hurst, who was a hunter and fisherman. And the first meeting we had to talk about the geese, Jim and I didn't want the geese killed, but we didn't know what we were doing. And so we were asking everyone's opinion, and people were very mixed in our group. We didn't agree on it, right? Because people said the poop and this and that. And Jack Hurst sits back and he says, well, I like to throw them in a crock pot with some potatoes and some onions, leave them there for a few hours. And then we got the animal rights person next to him. Okay, so our group was so divided about this. And you'll read it in the story, but we came up with a common goal that even Jack, and I gotta give credit to Jack Hurst, he agreed with us. He agreed to stick together because of the wetland defense. So Jack gave in on the geese, and we ended up working with the city and finding some solutions, and it worked out, but it was not easy. And boy, did some of those meetings get ugly. They went till after midnight, but they didn't get ugly because of our group. They got ugly because of dozens and dozens of other people who were important. Their voices were very important. I learned a lot from that struggle. Yeah, so you just have to stick with it. But the more you have built relationships, the more apple pies, the more cookies, the more singing Christmas carols to the trees you love. I don't care what it is. Look at the relationships you have built in this room, and you've been meeting for years and years and years to revere the work of an incredible writer. So you have built very strong relationships. You know how to do that. We've just got to keep doing that. We need it more than ever.
Yeah.
Right?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.